Thank you so much for being here today. How are you feeling, Annessa?
Feeling good. Yeah, super excited. I mean, what a great way to start, Kendall. That's my number one in succession transition is mentorship. So let's go from there.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to go to Des because she's taking a look at some of the questions that are coming in. So can you share the first one?
Sure. It's a great place to start. There's been a couple of questions around getting the ball rolling and actually starting the transition conversation, which we know is so hard to do. Do you have some advice?
Yeah, for sure. So that is the big kahuna, right? That's the scariest part. And especially from the junior generation's perspective, it's this constant dance. We want to show initiative. We want to show gumption. Hey, mom and dad, we've done our homework, but we have to make sure we are really delicate on that line of not looking pushy, not looking entitled. And so one of the things that I really think works with my own parents on our family farm and things like that is using third-party resources as much as you can if you feel that tension a little bit in your family farm dynamics. So Maggie Van Kemp in this space as well, her term is pace and grace. And I just love that because I think it really helps us slow down. And so FCC, that's why our role was created, because we recognize there is a national need to have a third party help start the conversation with Canadian families. And also there's excellent resources online, FCC's YouTube website, and external resources as well. So I always say, blame the internet. Say, hey, the internet said I should ask this question, even if it's the one you want to ask.
Well, I was going to ask you, sometimes it's difficult for folks to wade through the internet. There's so much information. There's so many third parties. Like, where does someone start?
Yeah, absolutely. And couldn't agree more, Sean. You type in family farm succession and it's overwhelming. So anything that can dive down, I really encourage to structure the conversation. We all hear we need to communicate more, we need to communicate better. How? So I'm a big promoter of, if I am new to the family farm business, come home from college, then my focus needs to be on how do I show mom and dad that I am gaining roles and responsibilities over time. It's all about timing, which I'm sure we'll talk about more here today. As we progress, then are we starting to open the conversation about ownership and equity, but I'm not asking that question the first day home from college. Hey, mom and dad, how much of this do I get? It's all about timing.
Love that, Annessa. Des, we got another question from the audience?
We've got lots. So we've actually seen a couple of things about getting into agriculture for the very first time. So yes, it's succession, but if you're not taking it over from your senior generation, do you have any advice for where to start?
Yeah, for sure. So there's kind of different spins on that. The two streams is, yes, I don't come from a family that's currently involved in agriculture, so brand new. And then the second stream is, even if I am a farm kid, when I come home, what value am I bringing to the current operation? So am I bringing a new enterprise, things like that. So, right as Kendall did a great lead in, huge advocate for mentorship. I saw in the chat, there was a couple people referring to the cattle industry. The CYL, Cattlemen's Young Leader Program, is an excellent mentorship program there. In BC, we'll put the link. They're doing lots of work for those that are interested in like garden and marketing that way. There's lots of resources out there again, but we know it's a difficult business to get into because of the economics. How expensive the land, the capital, everything is. It is a hard industry to simply break into size and scale.
Well, can I just challenge you for 2 seconds on that? Because it seems like there's more and more people that are getting interested in farming as customer expectations are changing, as there are new technologies coming into farming, things like indoor farming or vertical farming, or just getting into the sustainable space. Are you seeing more and more entrepreneurs get into this space, or especially in Canada, or is it still just kind of bubbling, people are just interested in it? Are you seeing new entrepreneurs come into this space?
Yeah, Yeah, as you say that, Sean, I'm going two ways again. Like for sure, there's a like homesteading I've heard now is a new thing. So that's, just a couple hours from where I live here in Alberta. That's becoming the hot new thing. But the other avenue I challenge is if you are, the young person coming home to your family farm, with the size and scale of today's operations, you have to be an entrepreneur. So that's why I'm so excited to hear that, financial management was the number one thing the young people want to learn about, because that will be your sustainable and viable business, right? But yeah, definitely some creative ways to add value to the enterprises and things like that are all kind of bubbling up, and it's really, really exciting.
Fantastic. Des, it's hot and heavy in the chat. Let's get to the next one.
So this is a bit of a loaded question for you, Annessa. There's been a few questions about this, and I know this is an issue near and dear to your heart. It's all around the off-farm siblings. So I'm going to read Warren's question verbatim here because he really articulates it well. If you have a couple non-farming children and a successor to the farm, how can you be fair even if it's not equal? Farms are generally asset rich, but cash poor.
Yeah, for sure. So kudos to Warren there. That's my saying, right? We have to come back to the fiscal reality. In agriculture, we are asset rich, cash poor, meaning we also then need to educate the off-farm siblings. And I think that's a gap that we have historically, is explaining what that actually means in plain English to them. So explaining how much capital it takes to run a business, whatever, if it's crop, dairy, any of those elements, and just really explaining that part. When it comes to the off-farm children, I like how you mentioned you used the word fair, not equal. That's a huge check mark that right there. Fair is subjective, and I challenge, have you asked the off-farm children what they want, right? A lot of the times I talk to my families and the parents say, well, I have to leave land to the off-farm children. And I say, have you talked to them about that? Yeah. Does that meet their goals and objectives? And also, what are we measuring? If we are doing, here in the prairies, land's the big elephant in the room, the price of land. Are we measuring fair market value or productive value? Because Sean, if I'm the farm kid, I will only see that fair market value number, which parents are doing their estate planning on, if I sell the land.
Absolutely. Right?
And so that's I think, breaking that down. Mm-hmm.
So if I'm, on that note, if I'm speaking to the next generation, if I'm speaking to my parents about this, how do I convince them? Like, what are some tactics that you have seen? Because, sometimes I know with my parents, it was like, I'm East Indian, so they wanted me to be like a doctor, an engineer, accountant, a lawyer, and you're trying to like push them off and try to convince them that there's a new way of doing things. What are some things that you suggest to some of the folks? How do we best educate? How do we sort of push down the doors and get them to see more than what's sort of that tunnel vision that they have?
Absolutely. So I'm a big promoter of, fiscal reality and having the visual representation. So if I'm the junior generation, if we're speaking at roles and responsibilities, and at that stage, am I coming and showing, meeting their expectations? Are we talking about the expectations? And then I'm saying, once we get to that time, okay, mom and dad, if the goal of the family is to continue on the family farm business, I need to make sure it's viable. So if you're telling me the will is reading that half the land is going to my off-farm siblings, for example, I no longer have a viable and sustainable operation, so we need to reassess. And perhaps that's off-farm income, things like that. But that really, I find the numbers makes parents actually address what I call the chicken will, that just says, I leave everything to my spouse, or, the farming child has to buy out their siblings for $1 million. And I say to mom and dad, could you do that today, sir, if that happened? Yes. And he goes, well, of course not. So just really putting the numbers to paper.
Well, you know what? The next, we gotta, where's the reality show where I see all these, we need like a really, Desperate Housewives. We need like desperate farm people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we need that show. I want to see these actual interactions. The financial component is so spicy. I think it would be a great show, Annessa. That's all I'm saying.
For sure. There is some tools though. So because that is the big one, right? So if we can, work with, as a junior generation, show initiative, work with our financial advisors, work with our advisory team. That's the most important thing we can do. Build a team to help support our business, accountants, lawyers, etc. And then have the conversation. If land or wealth is going to the off-farm children, am I guaranteed access to that land for a specific period of time, right, mom and dad? So, okay, land's going to Susie, my sister, but in the will, I get to lease it to her, right, for X amount of time. Also, the conversation of your off-farm children, siblings aren't wrong to see mom and dad helping you, farm kid, get ahead today. So is there any way that we can help them now to help them transform their lives instead of waiting for the big division when the will's read 40, 30 years from now?
Great advice. Des, another question.
Okay, I'm going to get you to back up a little bit, Annessa, because you did talk about lawyers and accountants. And Morgan had a great question here about who are the best contacts when looking at transitioning, and folks struggling to know who to talk to when they want to come up with a plan. So can you chat a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So great question. There's lots of different areas people play. So I'm a big promoter of a financial advisor. So do mom and dad actually know how much it costs them to live per year when we're trying to estimate what their retirement income needs to be, aka what the farm child can afford to pay them to live? Also, your accountants are excellent. A big part of succession planning is our tax efficiencies. How are we setting up our business structure? Capitalizing on some of the flexibility and subsidies that we have in agriculture, such as our capital gains exemption, family farm rollover rules. They will help you set up partnership agreements, corporation shareholder agreements to really protect the family and the business. And your lawyers for sure are right there with you. So they're the ones helping you set up any of those formal legal contracts, your will. Always a reminder to the junior generation, yes, your parents need to have a will, but do you as well, now that our equity is changing and transferring? So huge promoter of, if possible, the problem I see, Sean, is the accountant and the lawyer, for example, don't talk to each other. And so the business structure actually doesn't read how the will has been written. So please encourage your technical advisors. The farmer shouldn't be the one running around in the middle. Can we get them to talk to each other? Is a huge push.
Yeah, that's the difficulty, is because if you look at most professional services, they're all siloed. There's very few accounting firms that have law components, and there's very few. I don't know any law components that have accounting components. So you're right. Getting those folks together is important. Have you seen folks just specialize in both, and one lawyer will recommend another accountant? I'm sure there's ecosystems within this space, because if I'm a young farmer and I'm trying to figure all this out, I want to make sure that I'm going with an accounting group that understands this business, right? So I'm assuming those ecosystems exist already, where they have those sort of links.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's always, it's scary. I still get intimidated sitting in my accountant's office or my lawyer's office. So I always encourage, you are the technical advisor's customer. They are working to serve you. So if they are not open to discussing with you, hey, will you call my lawyer? If they're not willing to potentially, talk about disruptors, Sean, the coolest kind of new trends I'm seeing is just paying for them all to be at the same table. It's an expensive upfront cost, but instead of just splitting out those hours over the year, everyone sits at the same table at the same time. And that's where the magic is happening.
Bring everybody at the same table and pay for that, just to make things more seamless. That's amazing. Well, I don't know if I want an accountant or a lawyer at my dinner table, but okay, sure. It makes sense. We got 5 minutes here. There's been some really great bombs. I know we got a whole bunch of questions, so we're going to see if we can we can get to some more here. Des, what's the next one?
So next one is about the time to plan. So it sounds a little overwhelming, but how long should you grant yourself to be able to come up with this transition plan? We know it's not overnight. Can we give folks some realistic expectations of how long this might take?
Yeah, I love that. Excellent, excellent question. And that's actually one of my like drive home comments to sum up this whole part today is we are changing the viewpoint of transition is a process, not an event. And so every farm is in transition, whether you are the identified successor or not, your farm is naturally there because people age, right? And so how proactive are we going to be in that element? And so, you know, it's really hard to put a date stamp on it, Des, even to say multiple years, for example, because of the stages. So I hope we're progressing from roles and responsibilities to then, you know, potentially entering the corporation, incorporating ourselves, a partnership agreement, then transitioning to, okay, how is the equity being transferred, our wills, and timing of off-farm siblings. Is there an expectation of for how long can an off-farm sibling come home and join the business? We saw that a lot, Sean, when the oil and gas industry crashed here in Alberta. People that had no interest in the business coming home and all of a sudden wanting a piece of the pie. So I'm all about timelines and expectations.
Yeah, I was going to ask you as well, before we get to our last question, Des, you know, I see so many people getting interested in agriculture because of the technology component. Are you seeing more acquisitions or consolidation? You know, people from outside of the province, outside of countries are coming in and wanting a piece of it because they have the economies of scale, they have the technology to automate processes probably faster, and they see the opportunity here. And maybe if you're a farm, you're like, well, you know, these guys are coming in with a better value prop to utilize our assets. Are you seeing a little bit more of that, or am I sort of jumping ahead?
No, for sure. So in my area of southern Alberta, that's very high value cash crops down there. Certainly starting to see that come into play. And it is, you know, it's a delicate balance of protecting that family farm, that heritage, that legacy. But if that is the avenue that we then have to adjust, right? We have to pivot. And so I'm working with family farms that even though a massive corporation is buying their land, they're saying, okay, I get to rent it for 10 years. So at least my generation gets to finish farming. So it's tricky for sure,
Love
but I am
that.
starting to see it.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next decade as technology advances, and you're going to see a lot of organizations want to, you know, capitalize on their technological prowess. So, Des, last question for Annessa. Make it a good one. Make it spicy, and you know, let's see if we can get something controversial here.
Oh boy, it's a big ask, but I really want Annessa to wrap it all up in a bow for us today. What are the key takeaways, the major points you want folks on this event today to take home and use going forward in their own transition journeys?
Yeah, I think the hardest obstacle that we have to address, whether it's in the short term of being the junior generation and taking over the operation, or the long term of our parents writing a will, or you yourselves as a junior generation writing the will, the seed, the common bond is communication. And that's the hard stuff, right? And so to help with that, we need to start breaking down, and as I mentioned before, utilizing those third-party resources to ask questions such as, how much of the parent's retirement income is coming from the farm? What do I need to do, mom and dad, to prove to you that I can start to take over? Because in my meetings, it shocks me to sit across the table from a 60-year-old parent that says they still have issues with how the child showed up at 25 years of age, even though that kid's now 45 themselves, right? So or 40, but just being really careful to lay out expectations. Transition meetings are different than day-to-day operational meetings. Please separate those out. I always encourage minimum 2 transition meetings a year. And remember the telephone game, right, Sean? If you tell a message to one person, it gets construed as it goes down the line. This happens all the time. for transition, because it's so important, everyone sits down, hears the same message at the same time, and don't leave mom in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle, because that's often what happens to moms too.
Fantastic, Annessa. That was great. There were so many takeaways and insights for our audience today. I want to thank Des for getting all the questions. I want to thank everybody in the chat for providing some really great questions for Annessa. I know a lot of people are asking, how can I connect with Annessa? Do I get a recording of this? By the way, you get everything. There is going to be a recording of this. We're going to be sending out an email later, so feel free to take a look at that. It's only going to be around for a short number of time, but you can reach out to Annessa too. We'll provide the information in this sort of portal here as well. Annessa, thank you so much again.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sean. And just so you guys know, call in whether you're an FCC customer or not to any of your local FCC offices and get in touch with one of us across the country.